My stepmother tried turning my family against me, so on Mother's Day I got her the perfect gift and watched as she realized what it really meant. Vivian moved into our house 3 months after Mom died. Dad called it healing. I called it replacing. She was 34 to his 52, drove a white Mercedes, and wore perfume that cost more than my college textbooks. At first, she played the role perfectly. Sweet texts asking about my day, offering to help with my applications, buying my favorite snacks. But I noticed small things. How she'd rearrange Mom's photos to face the wall. How she'd sigh heavily whenever Dad mentioned Mom's name. How my little brother started calling her Mom within 6 weeks. Then came the isolation campaign. It started subtly during family dinners. Dad would mention something I'd told him, and Vivian would correct the story with her own version. One where I was always more selfish, more difficult, more ungrateful. Actually, honey, she said she didn't want to come to your work event, she'd say sweetly. I never said that. My brother would nod along, already under her spell. Dad would look confused but let it go. She had this trick of crying at exactly the right moments. When I'd challenge her lies, tears would well up. I'm just trying so hard to be a good mother to her, she'd sob to Dad. But she hates me for not being her real mom. I'd be the villain for making my grieving stepmother cry. By month 4, family dinners became performances of how difficult I was. How I refused Vivian's help, how I was stuck in the past, how I needed therapy to move forward. Dad started looking at me differently, disappointed, tired. My breaking point came when I overheard her on the phone with her sister. The daughter's almost out of the picture. She'll be at college soon and I can finally have the family I deserve. Just me, Richard, and the boy. We'll sell this depressing house, move somewhere new, and start fresh. She wasn't trying to be my mother. She was trying to erase me. That's when I started documenting everything. I recorded her conversations when she thought I wasn't home. I screenshot her texts to friends where she complained about Richard's first family baggage. I compiled evidence of her calculated manipulation. Mother's Day arrived 6 months after she moved in. Dad made reservations at the country club. Vivian bought herself an expensive bracelet and told Dad I'd picked it out. At brunch, surrounded by Dad's colleagues and their families, she played the role beautifully, talking about how much she loved being a mother, how she was trying so hard to honor my late mother's memory, how family was everything. That's when I handed her my gift, a beautifully wrapped box with a blue ribbon. I wanted to give you something really special, I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Something that shows how much I appreciate everything you've done for our family. She smiled that practiced smile and opened it carefully. Inside was a USB drive and a small card. Her face went white as she read, "For the mother who has everything except the truth. Every conversation, every text, every lie. Press play." Dad reached for the box, confused. What is this? Before I could answer, Vivian's phone buzzed, then Dad's, then 3 more phones at our table. I'd sent the compilation to everyone. Her voice played crystal clear through Dad's speaker. The daughter's almost out of the picture. The table went silent. Dad stared at his phone, then at Vivian, then at me. My brother looked confused. Vivian's practiced composure finally cracked. "You little," she started, but caught herself. Too many witnesses now. Dad stood up slowly, his face unreadable. That's when Vivian did something I didn't expect. Instead of defending herself or breaking down, she smiled. A real smile this time, cold and calculating. She leaned across the table and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You have no idea what you just started." She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the restaurant with her head high, like she'd just won instead of lost. Dad sat back down heavily, staring at his phone. My brother started crying, not understanding what was happening, and I realized with growing dread that I might have just made the biggest mistake of my life, because the look Vivian gave me before she left wasn't defeat. It was a promise. The drive home was silent except for my brother's sniffling. He was only 8, too young to understand what he'd just witnessed. Dad's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. I sat in the back seat, my phone blowing up with messages from relatives who'd received the files. When we pulled into the driveway, Vivian's Mercedes was already gone. Dad sat in the car for a full minute after turning off the engine, not moving. Finally, he spoke. "Inside. Now." My brother ran to his room. Dad and I stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Vivian had served perfectly plated dinners while dismantling our family. He played the recordings, all of them. His face went through stages. Confusion, disbelief, anger, then something worse, exhaustion. "How long have you known?" he asked. 2 months. 2 months. He repeated it like he didn't understand the words. "You've been sitting on this for 2 months? Living in this house, eating dinner with us, and you didn't say anything? I tried to tell you, multiple times. You didn't listen, so you decided to humiliate her in front of my colleagues, in front of the Hendersons and the Pratts? Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation?" That's when I understood. He wasn't angry at Vivian. He was angry at me. "She was erasing Mom," I said. "She was erasing me. Your mother is dead." The words hit like a slap. "She's been dead for 9 months. I'm allowed to move on. I'm allowed to be happy. She manipulated you. You heard the recordings? I heard you violating her privacy. I heard you recording private conversations without consent. Do you know that's illegal in this state?" I hadn't thought of that. Dad rubbed his face. "Go to your room. I need to think." I spent that night listening to Vivian's Mercedes pull into the driveway at 2 a.m., listened to their muffled voices through the walls. Couldn't make out words, but I heard her crying. The performance was continuing. By morning, Dad had made his decision. "Vivian is moving into a hotel for a few days while we figure this out," he said over breakfast. My brother pushed his cereal around his bowl, not eating. "You will apologize to her." "For what? Telling the truth? For how you did it? For the disrespect? For making a private family matter public?" He set down his coffee mug hard enough that it cracked. "I'm sending you to stay with your Aunt Patricia for the rest of the summer. You clearly need space from this situation." Aunt Patricia lived 3 hours away in a studio apartment that smelled like cat litter. She was Mom's sister, and she'd never liked Dad's remarriage. Didn't waste waste much time, did he? She'd muttered at Thanksgiving. I packed that afternoon. My brother watched from the hallway, his face scrunched up the way it got when he was trying not to cry. Are you coming back? Of course. Vivian said you were trying to destroy our family. When did she say that? Last night. She came to my room. She was crying and said you didn't want Dad to be happy, that you wanted it to be just us three again, like before. He wiped his nose. Is that true? No. But would that be so bad? Us three? He looked confused. I like having a mom again. The drive to Aunt Patricia's was quiet. Dad didn't put on music, didn't try to talk, just drove and occasionally checked his phone at red lights, probably texting Vivian. I thought you'd be on my side, I said finally. There are no sides. There's our family, and you just tried to destroy it. I know what she said. I heard the recordings, but relationships are complicated. Marriage is complicated. You're 17, you don't understand. I understand manipulation. I understand lying. What you don't understand is that people say things in private they don't mean, that everyone complains about their stepkids. That stress makes people say terrible things. He merged onto the highway. Vivian's been under enormous pressure trying to fit into this family, trying to be there for you kids while dealing with a teenager who resents her for existing. So this is my fault? I didn't say that. You're acting like it. He went quiet. We drove another hour before he spoke again. Your mother died suddenly. One day she was here, the next she was gone. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was drowning. His voice cracked. Vivian pulled me out of that. She made me remember I was still alive, that I could still feel something other than grief. So you replaced Mom. I found someone who helped me survive. There's a difference. Aunt Patricia met us at the door in her bathrobe, even though it was 3 p.m. She looked at Dad like he was tracking mud on her carpet. Patricia, Dad said stiffly. Richard, she turned to me. Your room's the couch. I cleared some space in the closet. Dad didn't come inside, just handed me my bags, gave me an awkward side hug, and left. Aunt Patricia watched his car disappear, then shut the door. So, she said, you finally did it. Did what? Stood up to him. She shuffled to the kitchen and poured herself wine even though it was barely afternoon. Your mother would have done the same thing. She never trusted that woman. You met Vivian? Once, at the wedding. She spent the whole reception calculating who in the room had money. I watched her. She's a spider. Aunt Patricia took a long drink. Your father's a fool. Always has been. But he's a fool with a bank account. And women like Vivian can smell money like sharks smell blood. I spent the first week at Aunt Patricia's sleeping until noon and avoiding my phone. The messages from classmates were brutal. Someone had leaked parts of the recordings online. My Instagram was full of comments. Half the people called me a hero for exposing Vivian. The other half called me a psycho for recording private conversations. My best friend Zoe texted, your stepmom's lawyers are saying you broke wiretapping laws. Is that true? I called her. What lawyers? It's all over her Facebook. She's claiming you violated her privacy and caused her severe emotional distress. My mom saw it. She's suing you. My stomach dropped. She can't sue me. I'm 17. She's suing your dad for failing to control you, I think. My mom's a paralegal. She said it's actually a decent case. You recorded her without consent in a two-party consent state. I hadn't even thought about the legal implications. I'd been so focused on exposing her that I didn't consider whether what I did was actually illegal. Aunt Patricia confirmed it that evening. Your father called. Vivian's retained a lawyer, Benjamin Ortega. He's expensive, does mostly corporate law, but he's taken her case as a favor. Apparently his wife is in Vivian's book club. She lit a cigarette at the kitchen table. They're claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and invasion of privacy. They're asking for $200,000 in damages. I don't have $200,000. I don't have $200. They're going after your college fund, the one your mother set up. It's in your name, but it's held in trust until you're 18. She ashed her cigarette. If they win, it's gone. 4 years of tuition, gone. I felt sick. Mom had worked 2 jobs to save that money. She'd started it when I was born, putting away money every month. It was supposed to be my future. There's more, Aunt Patricia said. Your father's threatening to file for emancipation. Says you're old enough to be legally independent if you're old enough to make these kinds of decisions. It would remove his financial responsibility for you. He wouldn't. He might. Vivian's convinced him you're a threat to their marriage, that they'll never have peace with you in the house. She stubbed out the cigarette. Your father's weak, always has been. He finds a woman and molds himself to whatever shape she needs. I spent that night researching Illinois wiretapping laws. It was worse than I thought. Recording someone without their consent was a Class 4 felony. Even for a minor, there could be criminal charges. Not just civil. Actual criminal prosecution. I'd wanted to expose Vivian. Instead, I'd handed her ammunition. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. Official legal documents on cream paper with embossed letterhead. Ortega and Associates. A cease and desist, demanding I delete all recordings, remove all posts, and refrain from any further defamation of their client. Failure to comply would result in immediate legal action. You need a lawyer, Aunt Patricia said. I can't afford one. Your mother had a lawyer, guy named Thompson, who handled her will. Let me call him. David Thompson met me at a coffee shop 3 days later. He was in his 60s, wore a bow tie, and had been Mom's lawyer since before I was born. He reviewed the documents while drinking black coffee. This is serious, he said finally. The recordings are legally problematic. Illinois is a 2-party consent state, which means both parties must consent to being recorded. You violated that. But she was lying, manipulating my dad. Doesn't that matter? Morally? Perhaps? Legally? No. He folded his hands. Truth is not a defense against invasion of privacy. Even if everything you recorded was accurate, you still violated the law by recording it. So I'm supposed to just let her get away with it? I'm not saying that. I'm saying you picked the wrong weapon. He pulled out a notepad. Tell me everything. Not about the recordings. About her behavior. Specifically, anything involving financial manipulation, control, or coercion of your father. I told him. About how Vivian had Dad change his will 2 months after moving in. About how she'd added herself to his bank accounts. about how she'd convinced him to sell mom's jewelry, heirlooms that were supposed to go to me, to make room for new memories, about how she'd slowly isolated him from his old friends, the ones who'd known mom. Thompson took notes. Did your father have access to legal counsel when he changed his will? I don't know. Vivian handled it. Said she knew a guy. A guy. He wrote that down. What was his name? Gerald something. Gerald Piccone, I think. Thompson's eyebrows went up. Gerald Piccone is a real estate attorney. He has no business drafting estate documents. That's a conflict of interest if I've ever seen one. He made another note. Your father's change of will could potentially be challenged if it can be shown he was under undue influence. And if this Piccone is Vivian's attorney, not your father's, that's problematic. Can you help me? I can try to protect your mother's assets. The college fund, specifically. It's in a trust with you as the beneficiary. Unless you're convicted of a crime against your father, it should be protected. He closed his notepad. But I can't defend you in the civil suit. That requires a different kind of lawyer, and frankly, you don't have a strong defense. You broke the law, even if your intentions were good. So what do? You settle. You apologize. You delete everything. And you hope Vivian's willing to drop this if you grovel enough. He finished his coffee. Or you fight, lose your college fund, and possibly face criminal charges. Those are your options. I didn't want either option. That evening, Dad called for the first time in 2 weeks. Vivian's willing to settle. What does she want? An apology, a public one, on social media. You admit what you did was wrong, that you violated her privacy, and that you made false claims about her character. But they weren't false. She wants you to say they were false. She wants her reputation restored, and she wants the college fund. My chest tightened. Mom's college fund? It'll go into a trust for your brother's education. Vivian thinks that's fair, considering the damage you've caused. That money is mine. Mom saved it for me. Your mother's dead. And right now, you're facing a lawsuit that could take everything anyway. This way, at least it stays in the family. He sighed. This is the best offer you're going to get. Her lawyer wanted full prosecution. I talked him down. You're on her side. I'm trying to protect both of you. If this goes to court, you could end up with a criminal record. Is that what you want? I hung up. Aunt Patricia was listening from the kitchen. Don't do it. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. She came into the living room. Your mother left that money for you, not your father, not your brother, you. She made me co-trustee specifically to prevent something like this. She sat down. I can block the transfer, but if I go to court, then we go to court. But we do it fighting, not rolling over. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Thompson back, and I'm calling someone else. A friend who specializes in elder abuse cases. Dad's not elderly. Undue influence applies at any age. If we can prove Vivian manipulated your father into changing his will, into giving her access to his accounts, into any of this, we might be able to protect what's yours. She dialed. But you need to tell me everything. Every detail about how she operated. Every time she isolated him. Every time she controlled information. Every financial decision she influenced. I spent the next 2 days writing everything down. Dates, times, conversations I'd overheard. How Vivian had convinced Dad to cancel his weekly poker night with college friends. How she'd suggested he needed a newer car. Then coincidentally found a Mercedes dealership having a sale, on the condition he trade in Mom's old Honda that I'd been promised for my birthday. How she'd redecorated the entire house, erasing every trace of Mom, saying it was therapeutic. Thompson met with us again, this time with his colleague, Natasha Brennan. She was younger, sharper, and wore a suit that cost more than my entire wardrobe. This is textbook isolation and control, Brennan said, reviewing my notes. She's following a pattern: remove competing relationships, control the environment, establish financial dependence, make him believe he can't survive without her. She looked at Thompson. How long were they dating before marriage? 3 months. Fast. That's very fast for a man who'd been married 20 years. She made notes. Love bombing, probably. Constant attention, perfect behavior, becoming whatever he needed her to be. She looked at me. Did she mirror his interests? Suddenly develop the same hobbies? I thought about it. Dad likes old movies, film noir stuff. Vivienne suddenly started watching them with him. She said it was her favorite genre too. But you never saw evidence of this interest before? No, her apartment was all modern, glass and chrome. No movie posters, no DVDs, nothing that suggested she cared about classic films. Brennan nodded. She was building a false connection, making herself indispensable. She turned to Thompson. We could potentially argue undue influence on the will changes and the financial access. But we need to move carefully. The recordings complicate everything. Can't we just delete them? I asked. They're already out there. Screenshots, shares, copies. You can delete your versions, but you can't erase them from the internet. She leaned back. Here's what I suggest. We separate the issues. The recordings are a criminal matter. We deal with that through an attorney in that field. But the will, the trust, the financial manipulation, that's civil, and we might have a case. Might? Your father's an adult who made conscious decisions. Proving he was unduly influenced is difficult. We'd need to show Vivian isolated him, controlled information, and exerted pressure to the point where he couldn't make independent choices. She paused. Did anyone else notice changes in his behavior? Friends, colleagues, family? I thought about the country club brunch. About how Dad's colleagues had looked uncomfortable when Vivian dominated the conversation. About how Uncle Dennis had pulled me aside at Christmas and asked if Dad was okay. My Uncle Dennis. He's Dad's brother. He mentioned something at Christmas about Dad seeming different. Different how? Quieter. More withdrawn. Like Vivian answered for him a lot. I need to talk to Dennis. Brennan jotted down a note. Anyone else? Dad's friend, Mr. Chen, Bruce Chen. They used to play poker every week. Vivian got Dad to stop going. She said it was taking time away from family bonding. Thompson and Brennan exchanged glances. That's isolation, Brennan said. Clear pattern of isolation. Over the next week, they built a case. Uncle Dennis confirmed that Dad had changed significantly after Vivian moved in, stopped returning calls, canceled family traditions, made excuses to avoid gatherings where Vivian wasn't welcome. Mr. Chen said the same thing. Dad had stopped coming to poker, stopped responding to texts, and when Chen showed up at the house one day to check on him, Vivian had answered the door and said Dad was busy. She was the gatekeeper, Brennan explained. Classic control behavior. She decided who had access to him. But we still had the problem of the recordings. Brennan referred me to Calvin Price, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in juvenile cases. He was expensive, $5,000 just for the retainer, but Aunt Patricia paid it. Price was blunt. You committed a Class 4 felony. In Illinois, that's 1 to 3 years in prison. Though as a minor, you'd likely get probation and community service if prosecuted. But here's the thing. Vivian doesn't want you prosecuted. She wants your money. So I should settle? I'm saying she's using the threat of prosecution as leverage. If you settle the civil suit, she'll likely drop any criminal complaints. But if you fight the civil suit and lose, she might push for criminal charges anyway. He pulled out a folder. Here's what I recommend. We proactively go to the state's attorney and admit what you did. You show remorse, you're a minor with no record, and you were acting out of concern for your father. We frame it as a misguided attempt to protect family, not malicious intent. Will that work? It might keep you out of jail, but it won't save the college fund. I felt trapped. Every path led to losing something. That night, my brother called. First time he'd contacted me since I left. Are you really not coming home? I don't know. Vivian says you're not. She says you hate us now. I don't hate you, but you hate her. I didn't know how to explain it to an 8-year-old. She's not who you think she is. She's nice to me. She makes good pancakes, and she doesn't get mad when I spill things like Dad does. That's because she's still trying to win Dad over. Once she feels secure, that'll change. You sound like a mean person. His voice got small. Vivian said you were always mean to her, that you wanted her to leave so Dad would be sad again. Did she tell you to call me? Silence. She did, didn't she? She said I should ask if you're sorry, that maybe if you apologize, you can come home. Tell Vivian I'm not apologizing. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, realizing Vivian was using my brother as a messenger, probably coaching him on what to say. Another manipulation. A week later, the state's attorney's office sent a letter. They were declining to prosecute the wiretapping charges due to my age and lack of criminal history, but they noted the violation on my record. Not a conviction, but a mark. Colleges would see it. Price called it a win. No jail time, no probation, just a slap on the wrist. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like Vivian had successfully painted me as the villain, the girl who recorded private conversations, the troubled stepdaughter who couldn't accept her father's new happiness. The civil suit moved forward. Vivian's lawyer, Ortega, filed motions. We filed counter motions. Thompson and Brennan argued that the college fund was protected by the original trust documents, that Dad had no authority to transfer it without Mom's co-trustee, Aunt Patricia, agreeing. And Aunt Patricia wasn't agreeing. The judge scheduled a hearing for August. I spent the summer at Aunt Patricia's, working at a grocery store to pay for basic expenses. Every paycheck went into a jar labeled legal fees. It wasn't enough. Thompson and Brennan were doing some work pro bono because they'd loved Mom, but I still owed thousands. Dad called once a month, brief calls where he asked how I was doing, then launched into updates about my brother. Never about Vivian, never asking when I was coming home. Your brother misses you, he'd say, then bring him to visit. Vivian thinks that's not a good idea right now. Not while all this legal stuff is pending. Of course she does. He'd go quiet. Then, you could end this anytime. Just settle. And lose Mom's money? Money's not everything. It is when you don't have it. We'd hang up and I'd feel hollow. The hearing arrived in mid-August. The courthouse was downtown, all marble and echoes. Vivian showed up in a cream-colored dress, looking elegant and wounded. Dad sat beside her, his hand on her knee. My brother wasn't there. Too young for court. We sat on opposite sides. Dad wouldn't look at me. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Harmon. She reviewed the case files while we waited. Then she called us to stand. This is a complicated situation, Judge Harmon said. A family fractured by grief, remarriage, and now allegations of manipulation. She looked at Vivian. Mrs. Calloway, you claim the defendant caused you severe emotional distress through her actions on Mother's Day. Vivian dabbed her eyes. Yes, Your Honor. I've been trying so hard to be a good mother to her, to honor her late mother's memory, and she humiliated me in front of my husband's colleagues. She violated my privacy and made me out to be some kind of villain. And you're seeking damages in the amount of $200,000. Yes, Your Honor. That was the amount my therapist suggested would cover my emotional trauma and the damage to my reputation. Judge Harmon turned to me. And you claim your stepmother has been systematically manipulating your father and attempting to isolate you from the family? Brennan stood. Yes, Your Honor. We have testimony from multiple witnesses describing changes in Mr. Calloway's behavior after his marriage to Mrs. Calloway, social isolation, financial decisions made under pressure, and a pattern of control that suggests undue influence. But you don't dispute that your client recorded private conversations without consent? No, Your Honor. That happened. But we'd argue it was a desperate attempt by a minor to document what she believed was psychological abuse. Believed, but couldn't prove. The recordings speak for themselves, Your Honor. The recordings are inadmissible in most contexts due to how they were obtained. Judge Harmon looked at the files again. What I see here is a grieving family that made poor choices all around. A young woman who violated privacy laws, however well-intentioned. A stepmother who perhaps moved too quickly into a sensitive family dynamic. and a father who failed to protect his daughter's interests while navigating his own grief. She set down the files. Here's my ruling. The college fund established by the late Mrs. Calloway is protected under the original trust documents. It was established with clear intent to benefit the daughter, with Mrs. Patricia Collins named as co-trustee specifically to ensure those wishes were honored. Mr. Calloway cannot unilaterally transfer those funds without Ms. Collins's consent, which has not been given. The fund remains intact. I felt Aunt Patricia squeeze my hand. However, Judge Harmon continued, the defendant did violate privacy laws. While I'm not ruling on criminal matters here, the civil claim of invasion of privacy has merit. I'm ordering the defendant to pay $15,000 in damages to Mrs. Calloway. This is significantly less than the requested amount, but reflects the genuine distress caused by the public nature of the recordings. My stomach dropped. $15,000. I didn't have $15,000. Your Honor, Brennan said, my client is a minor with limited income. Then she can work out a payment plan. Or her father can pay it as her legal guardian. Judge Harmon looked at Dad. Unless he'd like to pursue emancipation, in which case we'd need a separate hearing. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Vivian whispered something to him. We're not pursuing emancipation, Dad said quietly. Good. Then we're done here. Judge Harmon banged her gavel. Next case. Outside the courthouse, Vivian looked furious. She'd lost the college fund but won $15,000. A consolation prize she clearly didn't think was enough. She and Dad left without speaking to me. Thompson and Brennan walked me to Aunt Patricia's car. Could have been worse, Thompson said. The fund is safe. That's what matters. But now I owe her $15,000. Your father owes her $15,000, Brennan corrected. You're a minor. He's responsible for your debts. Whether he makes you pay him back is between you two. But legally, it's his problem. We drove back to Aunt Patricia's apartment in silence. I felt numb. We'd won, but it didn't feel like winning. That evening, Dad called. I need to talk to you. About the $15,000? Among other things. He paused. Can I come see you tomorrow? Just us? No Vivian? I agreed. He showed up the next morning looking exhausted, older than I'd ever seen him. We sat in Aunt Patricia's tiny living room, both of us perched awkwardly on furniture meant for one person. I paid Vivian the $15,000, he said. From my account, not yours. Thanks. Don't thank me. It's the least I could do. He rubbed his face. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about everything, and I don't know what's true anymore. I listen to those recordings and I hear Vivian saying terrible things, but I also remember the context. She was frustrated. I was bringing you up constantly, comparing her to your mother. Maybe she felt like she could never measure up. So you're defending her? I'm trying to understand her. There's a difference. He looked at me. But I'm also trying to understand you. You recorded private conversations. You made them public. That's not something I can just overlook. She was destroying our family. She was trying to build a new one, in her own way. Maybe it was clumsy. Maybe she said things she shouldn't have. But you can't record people without their knowledge and expect there to be no consequences. I protected Mom's college fund. At what cost? Your relationship with me? With your brother? He leaned forward. Do you know what your brother thinks of you now? He thinks you're the person who tried to destroy his family. Vivian talks to him every night about how much she loves our family, how she's trying to keep us together despite everything. And you're the villain in that story, because she made me the villain. No, you made yourself the villain when you chose humiliation over conversation. He stood up. I came here to tell you that you can come home, but there are conditions. What conditions? You apologize to Vivian, genuinely. You delete any remaining copies of the recordings, and you go to family therapy with us. All of us. We try to rebuild this. And if I don't, then I can't have you in the house. Not because I don't love you, but because Vivian deserves to feel safe in her own home. And right now, she doesn't trust you. I don't trust her. Then we're at an impasse. He walked to the door. You have until September. That's when school starts. If you want to come home and finish your senior year at your school, with your friends, you know what you need to do. He left. Aunt Patricia emerged from her bedroom where she'd been pretending not to listen. He's weak. He's my dad. He's choosing her over you. Don't make excuses for him. She lit a cigarette. You could stay here. Finish school at Westbrook. It's not the worst place. I thought about it. My whole life was 3 hours away. My friends, my school, my room that still had posters of bands I loved when I was 12, my brother. But going back meant apologizing to Vivian, pretending I was wrong, living in a house where she'd won. I spent the next week wrestling with it. Called Zoe, who said my old school missed me. Called my brother, who begged me to come home. Even called Mr. Chen, who said he'd be there if I needed someone to talk to. Finally, I made a decision. I called Dad. I'll come home. Thank God. Relief flooded his voice. We can pick you up this weekend, but I have conditions too. Silence. Then, what conditions? I'll apologize to Vivian for how I did it, for recording her and making it public, but I won't apologize for what I found, because it was true. If she wants an apology that says she was right and I was wrong, she's not getting it. That's not going to be good enough for her. Then tell her to sue me again. I've got nothing left to take. I took a breath. Second condition, family therapy, like you said, but I want to choose the therapist. Someone who specializes in blended families and grief, not whoever Vivian suggests. Fair. Third condition, my college fund stays mine. No access for her, no joint decision. That money was Mom's gift to me, and Vivian doesn't get to touch it. Already established by the court. Fourth condition, you spend time with me alone. No Vivian. Once a week, minimum. Because I lost my mom, and I'm losing you too. And I need to know if there's anything left of the dad I used to have. His voice went quiet. You're not losing me, aren't I? Long pause. I'll talk to Vivian. That's not a yes. It's the best I can do right now. I moved back home the first week of September. Vivian had redecorated my room. New bedding, new curtains, new paint, pale gray instead of the blue Mom and I had chosen together. I thought you'd like a fresh start, Vivian said from the doorway. You should have asked first. I was trying to do something nice. She crossed her arms. Your father said you wanted to apologize? The word stuck in my throat, but I'd promised. I'm sorry for recording you without permission. That was wrong. And I'm sorry for the way I revealed it. That was cruel. And that's it. Because everything on those recordings was real. You said what you said. You did what you did. I don't apologize for exposing the truth, only for how I did it. Her jaw tightened. That's not a real apology. It's the only one you're getting. We stared at each other. Finally, she smiled that cold smile. Well, at least we understand each other now. She walked away. Family therapy started the following week. Dr. Yolanda Reeves specialized in blended family. She had kind eyes but didn't take anyone's bullshit. First session, she made us each describe our perspective on what happened. Vivian cried through hers, talked about how hard she'd tried, how unwelcome I'd made her feel, how she'd said things in private that she didn't mean because she was frustrated and hurt. Dad talked about grief and moving on and trying to keep everyone happy. My brother talked about being confused and wanting everyone to stop fighting. I talked about watching my mother's memory get erased, about being gaslit and isolated, about feeling like I had to choose between exposing the truth and keeping the peace. Dr. Reeves listened to everything. Then she said, here's what I'm hearing. A family that didn't process grief before trying to blend. A stepmother who came in too fast and too strong. A daughter who felt threatened and lashed out. And a father who tried to avoid conflict instead of addressing it. She looked at each of us. Everyone here was wrong about something. Everyone here was hurt by something. And if you want this family to survive, you all need to accept both of those things. Over the next several months, therapy was brutal. We dug into everything. How Dad had started dating Vivian only 2 months after Mom died. How Vivian had pushed for marriage quickly, maybe because she was insecure about being a rebound. How I'd refused to give her any chance, seeing her as the enemy from day one. How my brother had attached to Vivian as a replacement for Mom because he was only 7 when Mom died and barely remembered her. Dr. Reeves made us do exercises, joint activities where we had to cooperate, conversations where we had to actually listen instead of just waiting to defend ourselves. Sessions where Vivian and I had to find one positive thing about each other. It was exhausting and slow, and sometimes it felt pointless, but tiny things started shifting. Vivian stopped rearranging the house without asking. I stopped treating every interaction with her as a battle. Dad started spending Saturday mornings with me alone, just coffee and conversation, like we used to. My brother slowly started understanding that loving Vivian didn't mean forgetting Mom, that I wasn't trying to take his new family away, just trying to preserve the memory of the old one. By Christmas, we weren't fixed, but we were functional. We could get through dinner without someone leaving the table. We could exchange gifts without it feeling like a transaction. Vivian gave me a framed photo of Mom. Not one I'd seen before. It must have been from Dad's collection. Mom laughing at some party, looking young and happy. I know I can't replace her, Vivian said quietly. I'm not trying to anymore. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. I graduated high school that spring. Used Mom's college fund to go to Northwestern, close enough to visit home but far enough to have space. Dad and Vivian both came to my graduation. So did Aunt Patricia, who made passive-aggressive comments about Vivian's dress. My brother gave me a card he'd made himself. Inside, thanks for not leaving forever. College was a reset. New people who didn't know about the Mother's Day incident. New friends who saw me as just another freshman, not the girl with the complicated family drama. But I went home for holidays. Not because things were perfect, but because they were family. Messy, broken, reconstructed family that didn't look like I'd wanted, but was what we had. Vivian and I would never be close, but we learned to coexist, to respect boundaries, to acknowledge that we both loved the same people, even if we'd never love each other. 3 years after the Mother's Day incident, I came home for Thanksgiving. Vivian was in the kitchen making her signature dishes, while Dad set the table. My brother, now 11, was playing video games in the living room. It looked normal. It felt almost normal. That evening, after dinner, Vivian found me on the back porch. She stood there awkwardly, like she was gathering courage. I need to say something, she finally said. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I braced myself. You were right, she said. Not about everything, but about some things. I did try to erase your mother. I did try to make this family into something new without respecting what it had been. I told myself I was helping your father move on, but really I was just insecure, afraid I'd never measure up to a dead woman. She sat down beside me. I said terrible things about you to my sister, things I didn't even fully. I was venting, but that doesn't make it okay. And when you exposed all of it, I was humiliated. So I fought back the only way I knew how, legally. Financially, making you the bad guy so I didn't have to be. She looked at me. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did. You were protecting what you loved. I can't fault you for that. I didn't know what to say. This was the most honest Vivian had ever been with me. I don't forgive you, I said finally. Not completely, but I don't hate you anymore either. She nodded. That's fair. We sat there in silence, watching the backyard where my brother was now playing basketball with the neighbor's kid, where Mom used to garden, where Dad would grill on summer evenings. The past was still there. The hurt was still there. But maybe slowly, we were learning to exist in the same space without destroying each other. One more thing, Vivian said. I'm glad your mother made that college fun, and I'm glad Patricia fought for it. You deserve to keep that piece of her. It wasn't an apology for trying to take it, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that was enough. I finished college with a degree in psychology, started working with blended families and adolescents dealing with grief, because I understood what it was like when families broke and tried to reform into something new, how messy it was, how painful, how possible if everyone was willing to do the work. My brother and I are close now. He still calls Vivian Mom, and it doesn't sting like it used to, because he also talks about our real mom, asks questions about her, looks through old photo albums with me when he visits. Dad and I rebuilt our relationship. It's different than before, more honest, less willing to avoid difficult conversations for the sake of peace. And Vivian, she's family now. Not the way Mom was. Not in a way that erases the hurt or pretends it didn't happen, but in the way that matters. She's there. At graduations, holidays, random Sunday dinners. She'll never be my mother, but she's my father's wife, my brother's bonus parent. Part of the strange, complicated thing our family became after everything fell apart. Sometimes I think about that Mother's Day, about the blue ribboned box and the look on her face when she opened it, about her walking out of that restaurant like she'd won. In some ways, she had. She'd survived exposure, legal battles, family therapy, and me. She'd kept her marriage and her place in our family. But in some ways, I'd won too. I'd kept my mother's money and memory. I'd forced honest conversations that needed to happen. I'd drawn lines that needed drawing. Really, nobody won. Or maybe we all did, in the smallest, hardest ways. Last Mother's Day, 5 years after that disaster, Vivian texted me, just a simple message. Thinking of your mom today. I know she'd be proud of you. I stared at that text for a long time. Then I replied, thanks. She'd probably have thoughts about you too. Vivian sent back a laughing emoji. Probably not good ones. Probably not. But she'd appreciate that you're trying. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the family I'd wanted, but it was the family we'd built from the ruins of everything that broke. And some days, that was enough.